Hello there, welcome back to the channel. This is Nerd World, and as you can see, things are a little different. Not quite got this set up yet, but I've been ill, so I think you can forgive me for falling a little bit behind. Today's episode on a subject that I think we all as Trekkies really love: the science and politics of Star Trek and the inner workings of the Federation Council on a day-to-day basis. No. The most destructive weapons ever featured in Star Trek, at least some of them. There are going to be a few honourable mentions, but there are also going to be the big boombas themselves. Boombas? I don't think I've ever used that word before in my entire life. Okay, so first on our list is the Xindi superweapon Death Star with superweapon. This was created in 2153 by the Xindi when they were misled by beings from an alternate timeline, future dimension thing, deserve their own video. They misled the Xindi into believing that humans would destroy their homeworld. A homeworld that had already been destroyed. This was all very confusing, probably meaning their new homeworld that they don't even have yet. The weapon was capable of destroying an entire planet in one horrifically powerful discharge of energy. It was basically a very powerful phaser. Of course, I know, not exactly a phaser, but let's use phaser as an example because it was basically a big phase energy stream that destroyed something up to the size of a planet like Earth and was reusable. It didn't just fire once and it was thrown away. The weapon could be repaired and maintained and used again. This was a very destructive weapon. The next weapon on our list will be the Scimitar, or generally, more specifically, the Thaleron weapon system of the Scimitar. The Scimitar was a very powerful starship, Riemann built using Romulan-based technology, but the vessel itself is not the most powerful weapon in the Star Trek universe. The weapon which it carried was a Thaleron-based radiogenic weapon. This was capable of destroying any organic matter from microcellular bacteria all the way up to large complex organisms as well as other organic tissue, completely destroying it, leaving the entire place inert and gone. Completely gone. This was an incredibly destructive weapon, again designed to destroy Earth, although it wasn't its original constructed intention. It was the power play that Shinzon used to get power, promising the Romulans that he would eliminate the threat of the Federation, and the best way to do that was destroy Earth, which was the center of said Federation. It's debatable as to whether or not that would have really worked. It would have caused a massive wars. Of course, this weapon didn't destroy weapons and technology. Starfleet would have still been functional and likely would have retaliated against the Romulan Star Empire. Plus, there were over 200 other member races which would have simply taken over. It may have hurt the Federation, certainly, but would it have destroyed it? I don't think so. Next weapon on our list, we're moving up in scale a little bit. The Trilithium Missile. This weapon was first seen used by an Ilorian scientist. It had been attempted to be developed by the Romulans previously. This Ilorian scientist, known as Dr. Tolian Soren, had attempted to develop the weapon as a means to alter gravitational eddies in a region of space in order to be re-enveloped into the nexus that he had been, from his point of view, forcibly removed from by the USS Enterprise B. The weapon was capable of stopping all fusion within a star. This would of course destroy the star and by extension everything within the star system. A secondary side effect of the weapon, which wasn't predicted by Starfleet initially, was it would create a supernova, a huge shockwave emanating from the collapsing star that would destroy everything within the system. This was used against the Amargosa star and later in the Viridian system. The Dominion are the only other known power to have this weapon that have been seen to demonstrate it, attempting to destroy the Bajoran star and take out Bajor and Deep Space Nine and destabilize the region, of course, because, you know, the founders are dicks. Just to point it out as well, to add on to the end of this, I'm not including biogenetic weapons, thinking of the founders, like the one created by Section 31. That's a separate list, but I might do it. At the minute, I'm going with more traditional, standard boom weapons, and we'll get into the big ones now. Another one, this one from the Federation this time. One of the most destructive weapons, if you can really call it a weapon, but I think we can all agree that the military potential of it is pretty self-evident, and that is of course the Genesis device. The Klingons of course appreciated the destructive capability of this weapon, more so than anyone else, and even human scientists, Dr. Carol Marcus and her son David Marcus, who were developing the weapon, recognized and feared the destructive potential of this weapon if the military hardliners, even within the Federation, were to decide to weaponize it. Even though, unlike a lot of weapons that require modification to make them a weapon, such as the Verderon array used by Terra Prime in the 22nd century, not strictly a weapon, it wasn't accurate enough, the Genesis device didn't need to be. The Genesis device was designed as a quick terraforming method, although it had flaws in the matrix that would ultimately result in the destruction of the planet that had been used to terraform. It did have potential, but another side effect of the weapon was any organic life, anything of any description, any matrix of life that existed in the known general parameters of life, not including more existential forms of life that have been encountered periodically, but more traditional silicon-based or carbon-based life forms, their life would be completely extinguished by the deployment of this device against said planet. In other words, if you were to drop this thing on Earth, all life that had ever existed on Earth and ever could exist from the existing genetic material that exists on Earth would be completely destroyed. Everything from the bottom of the ocean right up into the atmosphere, it would be gone and replaced by a completely new biogenetic matrix designed by the Genesis device. Now, that is great for a planet like, say, Mars or Venus, not so good for Earth, or Kronos as the Klingons would have seen it, or Romulus as the Romulans might have seen it. Of course, Starfleet didn't develop this thing as a weapon, but it could you could imagine during the dark days of the Dominion someone going, you know, maybe we just drop one of these things on Cardassia, or the Breen homeworld. Maybe. Before we get on to the final weapon on my list, a few honourable mentions. First honourable mention, the Borg Collective. The Borg, in and of themselves, are just one gigantic weapon. So, I didn't want to put them on the list because they're not specifically a weapon. The Borg are a race, but because they are part machine and the way they operate, their very presence is destructive to other life, and as a result, they are a relentless force of destruction, therefore they're sort of a weapon. Another one, the humble Photon Torpedo. Stay with me. Photon Torpedo. You think of it as just being a generic weapon used by Starfleet, the Klingons, whoever. It's basically a torpedo. And because they call it a torpedo, you think of it being like a torpedo launched from a submarine now, when you really don't appreciate just how destructive one of these things is. A photon torpedo uses a matter-antimatter warhead. If you don't know what antimatter is, in brief, matter is anti what everything else is. If it comes into contact with traditional matter, the stuff that makes up your curtains, the stuff that makes up you, the stuff that makes up the planet, it mutually annihilates it. In other words, mutually assured destruction. It is generally considered that you use phasers to disable a ship, you use torpedoes when you want to destroy it. In fact, phasers are better at getting through shields. But you use your phasers to break the shields and then you hit the ship with a torpedo. That's why you don't see much debris in Star Trek, because the force of the explosion of the torpedo annihilates much of the matter, as well as the extremely powerful explosion created when this thing goes off. Now, to put that into some perspective, these things, even a basic torpedo used aboard Kirk's Enterprise, and I mean a basic one, not set to full power, had more destructive capability than some of the most powerful nukes we have right now. The potential destructive capability is what puts it as an honourable mention, because it's not usually used in that fashion. But just a few of these things fired from orbit at a planet can lay waste to a continent. They are very powerful. And finally, we have the Krenim Temporal Weapon Ship. This is potentially the most terrifying and destructive weapon ever envisioned in the whole of sci-fi, not just Star Trek. This weapon was capable of selectively altering the destiny of a single molecule or an entire civilization, for good or for ill. It could have erased the comet that wiped out the dinosaurs. Great dinosaurs that exist, but we wouldn't. And that was the destructive power of this weapon. It didn't blow stuff up. It didn't eviscerate, explode, disintegrate. No, it just erased from time itself. It took whatever you evolved from and stopped it evolving. Anarax, the man that designed this, used it to theoretically restore the Krenim Imperium to former glory. In reality, he was committing acts of mass genocide, often trying to rationalize it by, they never really existed in the first place, so how could I have killed them? Of course, he could never even convince himself of this and was wrapped by guilt. after 300 years of wiping out race after race after race, sometimes restoring them, only to destroy them again. Civilizations would rise and fall on a whim for him, depending on whether he thought that it was beneficial to the existence of his people and nothing else. To turn the Krenim from a provincial nothing into a major galactic superpower was his main and only goal, aside from the restoration of the colony which he came from, where his wife had been erased from time in his first ever use of the device. As a result of this, the weapon is terrifying. It simply erases everything from time itself. The vessel itself as well utilizes a temporal core. The temporal core takes the vessel slightly out of phase with normal space-time. This means that it is impervious to practically all known forms of attack: photon, quantum torpedoes, tri-cobalt devices, phasers, disruptors, isolytic warheads, things of this nature. They're not going to work on it. It's going to brush them off like you just tapped it on the shoulder, but in reality you just dropped a nuke on it. It's not even phased. It doesn't even shake. The only way to defend against the weapon was to either have your own temporal core or to use temporal shielding. This wouldn't be a technology that the Federation would widely use until at least the 29th century, when the Temporal Integrity Commission also had temporal cores aboard their starships, such as the USS Relativity. But they didn't use the technology to selectively erase civilizations, people, and objects from time, although the temporal disruptor bomb probably served a similar function, but on a smaller scale. So that's my list. I probably will do a breakdown of these individually at a later date. I just wanted to do a nice little neat compilation for easy digestion. Let me know in the comments below what I've missed, because I know I've missed some weapons from Trek. If you want to see another list, or if you want me to do the list on the biological weapons utilized across the Trek franchise, which to me serve a different category of weapon of mass destruction, again, let me know in the comments below. I just want to take this moment to thank you for watching that video. If you liked what you saw, please check out my social links in the description box below to Instagram and Twitter and others, and also is down there a link to my Patreon page where you can support this channel and the others as I try to grow this franchise and do this more regularly. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, thank you for watching, and bye bye. Oh, what was that weapon I was going to mention? There was another one.